Welcome to the show. It's Abbey Nation Sports Talk. We're up and rolling along with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. It is the eve of Notre Dame's spring football practice. We're going to get a partial practice viewing Wednesday morning, and then we'll get to talk with Marcus Freeman afterwards. It's finally practically here, Jess. Ready to go.
You say finally, but like 2 months ago was the national championship. I think that this is like blown by. It's like a blink of the eye, and now we're already at the start of spring practice.
I mean, in some ways it's been quick, but I mean, you also have to factor in the fact that typically by this point in the calendar, we are a good week or so into spring. Whether they start, they've started at the end of February before, they've started right before spring break and then took spring break and then come back. But one way or another, we've usually had at least a practice or two that we've been to by now. So I get what you're saying. It hasn't even been a full 2 months since the national championship game, but here we are. And let's be honest, part two. I mean, we're content producers and we need something new to give us some content, right? So from that aspect, like these last couple of weeks, I think have kind of dragged on a little bit because we've had the schedule. We've known that it's coming, but now it's finally here. So we're ready to go. We got a lot that we're going to talk about today. I will go ahead and mention, and I will do this because some people have been asking for a bracket or brackets, plural, and our own Vince D'Addario,
what a guy,
has produced men's and women's brackets on the old ESPN. There is the men's bracket right there. And here is the women's. Well, give me just a second here. Putting up links right now to the men's and women's bracket. So if you happen to be listening to the audio podcast after the live YouTube show, just go to the first couple of minutes and if you want to participate, the links are right there. Men's bracket, women's bracket. You can fill them out. And Andre wants to know if I'm going to put them on the X. I suppose I can. Like, is anyone really going to care on the X? I mean, that's the real question, isn't it? I can put them up there though, Andre. But you can also, if you're a premium member of the Champions Lounge, you can find them there. Vince D'Addario made a post in the Champions Lounge, and he linked both of them. The title of the post is IB Men's and Women's Bracket Challenge! ! Signed Vince D'Addario. So they are there, and they are ready to go. Jump at them.
Do you want to know an honest truth?
Sure.
I'm contemplating doing no brackets this year.
I'm not into it as much as I've been ever probably this year for some reason. I don't know.
It's weird that we're both feeling the same way.
I know.
But I was just like, I already sports gamble enough. I already have this and that going on. I'm going to some of the first round games this weekend here in Cleveland. I was like, why don't I just enjoy these bad boys? I don't need to be checking another thing, seeing how my bracket is doing, spending money here to probably lose. Like, I might just sit back and just enjoy this tournament for what it is. No brackets, nothing else, just me and basketball. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm going to still watch these games and be into it, but I don't know. I feel like I don't need the bracket this year.
I think it's a good plan. John says the bracket contest is free, but you can also free yourself of any,
yeah, exactly.
I was going to pick that and, all those different things. Or,
because they still give you the analytics of you're in this percentile and that percentile. And it's like, naturally, I don't want to be in the bottom if I do this bracket.
Men's brackets especially get tougher and tougher to pick every year. And I feel like this year is just right up there, just because with the transfer portal and everything else, and you've got all these teams in the SEC who are supposed to dominate. So, of course, it'll probably be some non-SEC team that ends up winning the whole thing. Is the way that'll end up going. But
I'm picking Florida.
You can jump. Are you picking Florida? They look pretty
That's
good in the SEC tournament. Yeah. Yep. They look good in the SEC tournament. Well, Notre Dame's got a quarterback competition going on, Jess. Or they're going to. Anyway, it's going to start this spring. Is this the most important quarterback battle at Notre Dame that you can remember?
Yes. And I'll tell you why.
Yes, expand, please.
This is the most important quarterback challenge, or I guess what is that? What we're calling it? Battle. Because you're off the eve of a national championship, and you have to. This isn't a year to you can't fall out of the playoff this year. You can't. I mean, anything less than a national championship appearance would be considered a regression, but I'm not really looking at it that way. I think you still need to potentially make the playoff, win a few games, game or two, but you can't go back to 9-3, 8-4 kind of territory. So I think it's a very important year to establish a quarterback. And then also, they've gone to the portal, like 3-4 years now in a row.
Three of the last four.
Also, that weighs into it as well. So you combine those things together, you've established yourself as Notre Dame, you've established yourself as Marcus Freeman in the new, college football format. It would be a disservice, I think, to the program and to, your national kind of reputation to not get this thing figured out. So there is a lot into this quarterback battle.
I mean, the only two I can think of in the last 10 years, Deshaun Kaiser, Malik Zaire in 2015, and then Ian Book and Brandon Wimbush a couple years later. And I think I'd probably go back to Kaiser Zaire in terms of importance, especially, I guess that was actually 2016 where that was the battle, because it was the year after 2015 when Zaire got hurt. So the last 9 years, basically the 2016 season. And I mean, that season went wrong for a lot of reasons. But going with the two quarterback system was definitely one of them. It wasn't the only reason that season went wrong, but this is not going to end up like that. But that was probably the last big, ultra important, I think, quarterback battle. And this is important because of the fact, I mean, you hit it. 3 of the last 4 years, they've gone to the portal. You've got homegrown guys now. After bringing in Sam Hartman and Riley Leonard the last 2 years, you've got your own guys in-house, 3 of them, as a matter of fact, who you have recruited and signed and brought here and developed here. And just in terms of how you are doing all those things, recruiting, signing, developing quarterbacks, a lot of that is going to weigh on the outcome. It's, like at least the start of that is going to weigh on the outcome of what happens in this quarterback battle, this 3-man battle between CJ Carr, Steve Angeli, and Kenny Minchey. So we're both in agreement on that, just in terms of the importance. There is only so much that we're, actually going to be able to see in these first 2 weeks, starting with Wednesday. We're going to get a partial viewing Wednesday. We're going to see stretching in the first 4 periods of practice. We'll get to see the same a week from Wednesday as well. But specific to the quarterbacks, Jess, if you were out there, what would you be looking for on day one?
Yeah, if I were out there, looking at the quarterbacks, I think the first thing that I would look at is just comfortability within the offense, because I think at this point, the offense really isn't going to be tailored around Riley Leonard, skill set like it was last season. There's not going to be as much, quarterback run, or I should say quarterback design run plays. So I just want to see who's got the most fluidity and comfortability in the offense. Who's getting the ball into the right spot, who's making the right play, who's,
go ahead.
You want to see them going kind of naturally through their progressions and not just taking maybe the easy route, or maybe taking the, press the ball downfield and go for the home run shot consistently. I want to see the guy who's executing the play, how it's, basically drawn up. And then also, I think a big thing is if the first progression isn't there, how are they working through their second progression? I think what you're about to say is you guys probably won't see a lot of that because it is
You're absolutely right, because it is a partial practice. I mean, we're going to get to see stretching, and then when stretching is done, they typically scatter to their position groups and they do a little position group work. And the first thing the quarterbacks do is just start doing a little bit of throwing. Gino Gaduli goes over there with them, and a couple guys, like two of the guys will throw passes, and Gaduli has been, like a fourth guy out there. We might see Rezak or whoever other walk on out there with that group as well. I would assume that we would, since it's spring now. But they essentially just kind of toss the ball a little bit, play catch a little bit, and then they'll start throwing to some running backs. We'll see some of that, maybe some zone read type look and those kind of things. And if we get lucky, we'll get to probably see them throw some footballs to some wide receivers as well, just like the start of some route tree stuff. I will be curious if, like, by period 4, if we get to even see a DB line up against a wide receiver as they throw. I don't know. Day 1, I would not be sliding my chips to that side of the table, to be quite honest. So like for me, I think we're all going to be comparing arms. We're going to be comparing accuracy. And that's going to be the biggest thing. Like, how does the ball look coming out of their hands? Like, who appears to have the strongest arm? Who appears to have the most accurate arm? Are any of them up or down or sideways? For the most part, all three of these guys tend to be very accurate. Like there's not a whole lot of differences, especially in terms of, short and intermediate type stuff in terms of what the accuracy looks like. Are we going to get to see them air it out at all and kind of really get to compare, sort of what it looks like, what the differences in the arms look like? Those are going to probably be the main things that we actually get to look at on day 1.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you could throw in there is like ease, like how easily are they going through it? I think there's some throwing motions where it looks, maybe more forced than others. Is it nice, natural ease? Does the ball kind of pop out of their hand type situation? And, obviously with CJ Carr coming off the injury, you want to see if there's, maybe anything new, that maybe came off of that elbow. Did he change mechanics a little bit? Did he change maybe his arm slot a little bit? Anything that could potentially come out. So, it's you're going to see stretching individual periods. So you might see him throw some routes to the running backs. You might see him throw a couple routes to, like, I don't even think you probably won't even see him throw to the wide receivers, if I'm being honest. So I guess
usually around period 5 is where some of that stuff starts, but we're only getting the first 4 periods. So
period 5 is after period 5 is when you start getting into some sort of group activity.
Right.
So
it's pretty universal, is what you're saying, in terms of how coaches lay out their practices, huh?
Does Notre Dame do a pre-practice period at all? Like, do guys get out there maybe like 25, 30 minutes before stretching, and usually maybe get some like walkthrough, or just, we did that a lot of, like, maybe we were putting in new blitz packages. We would just kind of not quickly, but walk through a couple of things that we knew we wanted to install before that day of practice. It's almost like a cheat before the exam, to be honest with you, because you get out there, you're trying some new stuff, kind of communicate a little bit, and then you go into practice afterwards. So, like, I don't know if you guys get to see that. So maybe you do. So, like, that would be something to maybe keep an overall
those kind of
eye
things
on.
We won't. They'll only let us in once stretching starts, basically, because sometimes, even though, like, they'll announce a specific time that we're supposed to get in, but sometimes that gets pushed back 5 or 10 minutes because of that period that you're talking about. Like, they'll just be breaking that period that you're talking about, like the pre-practice type stuff, and then getting into the warm-ups and stretching once we get in. But you will see them, kind of the end of that every now and then, where they're doing some of that kind of stuff. And a lot of the position groups, especially the offensive line, will stay after as well to work on other stuff typically. But yeah.
So I think the biggest question that could come up tomorrow is, who is going to have the most outlandish take based off of stretching and
do you want me to name names?
Drills?
Do you want me to name names?
No. No, that wouldn't
Did
be
you order the
good.
code red, Jesse? Did you order the code red?
I just think it's coming though. That's why I can joke about
I
it.
know.
Someone is going to say something crazy
Yep.
based off of one little drill that they see tomorrow, and it's
And
going to
then Vince and I are going
spin
to be on the
everyone
show
around.
tomorrow, and we're going to have to answer for it.
Yes,
That's right. Well, I heard. I heard.
So
Yeah.
I can't wait for that. That's going to be a fun time in my opinion, because, and that's what I'm just trying to warn people is like, don't listen to that stuff, because you're not going to get a real glimpse of anything material to make that kind of broad statement or
I literally just laid out like what those first few practice, periods of practice look like. And so there's like, it is, we will get to see like what the arm strength looks like, like everyone's going to be looking at CJ Carr's arm, again, even though he was doing warm-ups, and there was plenty of video of him doing warm-ups before college football playoff games once his elbow was healthy. But, people are still going to be worried about that. So don't worry. I'll break out the camera tomorrow and I'll, get a little bit of video from practice, and you can kind of see yourself exactly what it looks like. What do you think the biggest overreaction specific to the quarterbacks could be after day one? Like if someone's a little erratic and all of a sudden this guy, is like the least accurate of the three, that kind of stuff?
I think it'll be, this quarterback checks all the boxes. He looks so good. and any doubters out there should no longer doubt that this person is steadily in the lead for the race and it's theirs for the taking.
Oh boy.
I think that's the kind of headline that would come out tomorrow. What do you disagree?
No, and I mean, when you said that, I don't know if you had a specific, one of the three in mind, but I sure did. Like
I know. So that's the route it's going to go.
People drool all over this guy for some reason. He has put in the time, Jesse. He has put in the time.
And it is now his time. He earned it. It deserves it.
Yes. Sports is a meritocracy, and meritocracy means you earn what you get, right? It doesn't mean he who puts in the most time gets the job. That means the guy who is the best gets the job. And like
some people have to put in more time to acquire said talent than others. It's a matter of where that talent is at the end of the day.
Yes.
It's no one else's fault that you could be more talented at something and it takes less time and effort. It's just the nature of the beast, right? And so you hope that everyone pushes as hard as possible to raise that talent bar as high as possible, but it doesn't mean that it's the same amount of time that goes in is the same for each player.
You could have had 50 guys who were in the Tennessee program before Peyton Manning got there, but once Peyton Manning stepped foot on campus, there was no question who the best guy for the job was, right? Who the most talented guy was, right?
Regardless of how long they've been there.
That's right. That's exactly right. Mike says he just hopes it's a real quarterback battle. Best player should and hopefully will play. I have no doubt the best quarterback is going to play, but that doesn't mean there won't be reactions to who the other two guys are who don't get the job when it's all said and done. But I do absolutely believe the best guy is going to end up getting the job and playing. So let's go. We'll finish on the quarterbacks and we'll talk about some other stuff. We're not going to spend the whole time talking about the quarterbacks, but it is at the top of the list, obviously, of what's going to happen. What's the top question that you have for each of these three guys? Let's just go one at a time. Start off with the old veteran, the wily one, Steve Angeli.
My thing with Steve Angeli is, can you press the ball downfield? And if a play goes through the first or second progression, where are we going with the ball? Is it just his nervous habit is to just kind of get that thing out underneath and short? I just don't think that bodes well every play. So again, are you pushing the ball downfield?
One read, okay, now I'm checked down.
Right.
Check down Steve, back to that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And that's the thing is nothing has to be it's where's the play designed and developed to go? And if it doesn't go there, I just don't want to see him check it down or something short underneath. Like, you need to be able to make a play outside of the first progression, other than a short check down. So that's what I've been looking
everything
at.
can happen within 8 yards of the line of scrimmage. The field has to expand. Like Andre is saying, deep ball accuracy. That's one for me, but mine is more in lines kind of along with what you're saying. It's not just pushing the ball downfield. It is the ability to make the proper reads and, have that internal clock in the right place so that you're making the proper reads. And it's not just, boom, this is covered, time to check down. Like there's got to be a little bit more patience. Not just patience, just, again, I think it's more internal clock, trusting your eyes, not rushing things with your eyes and your head to be able to make those reads. I'll come back to this in just a second, DJ. So that's Steve Angeli. What about CJ Carr?
I would say the 2 C's, consistency and comfortability. Can he consistently make the right play and not, he can't make 3 really wow plays or really good plays and then have like 2 or 3 like mulligan plays. Like, what are you doing? So I need to see him consistently, make the right play, move the ball downfield, and then comfortability. I don't want the offense to feel like it's overwhelming him at the end of the day. He's comfortable in it. He knows what's going on. He needs to be ahead of everyone else, essentially. I don't want the offense to dictate him. He needs to dictate the offense.
Seeing like all those things that we just talked about with Steve Angeli, what we got to see from CJ Carr last year, were not a problem for CJ Carr as a freshman early enrollee quarterback. And so my question is, can he just elevate what was already an advanced approach and advanced game that he had last year? That's the biggest question for me. Can he continue to elevate? Going back to Steve Angeli, Andy Saylor says, what will Angeli do to avoid the sacks that he is prone?
Well, he likes to check the ball down.
And that's right. And that's how he avoids the sack. But where he gets stuck is when he is taking too long to go through those progressions. Like if there is nothing there, again, it's part of that internal clock. Like, you've only got so long back there. And if it doesn't happen, you got to get moving. And that's how he's eaten some of those sacks. And Corey says he doesn't trust him to stay on his feet. Again, like what we're going to see tomorrow is obviously not going to be, not going to play into that. But what we see in a couple of weeks toward the end of spring practice, when, assuming that we get to see a live scrimmage again, which it looks like based on the schedule, the time that we're allotted to see and what we're probably going to see, it looks like we'll probably get to see some live stuff. Keep the fingers crossed anyway. But, we will be able to see some of that. So, yeah, again, like for me with Carr, he already has all the tools. It's there between, the ears, the arm is there, the touch, all these different things are there. So can he show that he can continue to elevate that? That's the biggest thing for me. What about Kenny Minchey? Because he is kind of the dark horse in this whole thing. And let's be honest, most people I think are talking about Angeli in CJ Carr, but Kenny Minchey is in this mix as well. And obviously he's a year older than CJ Carr. So what's your biggest question for Minchey or on Minchey?
Yeah, so as unfair as what I'm about to say is, it's just the natural truth, and a lot of because of what you just said. I mean, this is really, if you ask a lot of people between Angeli and Carr, not to say that Minchey doesn't have a chance or deserves a fair shot at this, and he'll get that. And so I think, honestly, what I would look from Minchey is what separates him from Angeli or Carr at the end of the day. What can he do that they can't to elevate this team, essentially? So that's, and again, I that's maybe a little bit unfair to Kenny Minchey, but just because of where things naturally are, I think that's the best answer for this question.
Yeah, I think he's got more physical tools than Steve Angeli, but between the two, Angeli has a lot better grasp and command of the offense between he and Minchey. And so, like for Minchey, my question is, can he show a command of the offense that is on par with Steve Angeli? Because if he can do that, then I have, then he can be a legitimate part of this competition. But that's what keeps Angeli in it. Like we were talking about the time in the program and all that stuff. He does have an intelligence, and he does have, there are things that he does well. Like he is an accurate passer, right? Like when the read is there, he is able to deliver the ball, and he typically delivers the ball on time. But there are other things that get him stuck. The things that get him stuck are the fact that he does not quite have the same skill set. And I'm talking about legs, mobility, and, the ability to get himself out of some of that rush the way Kenny Minchey does. That is a place where Kenny Minchey has himself ahead of Steve Angeli, but can Minchey show a command of the offense, which is ultimately what it's going to take. Like, you can't just be a guy who can, slip past a pass rush and go tuck it and run. He's got to be able to show a full command of the offense. And to me, that's just the biggest question for Kenny Minchey. DK said nobody checked down more than Leonard, but he'd just tuck it and run. And I mean, things worked out for Leonard because of those legs, right? Set himself apart. DJ said, like he said on the board, if Steve wins the job, Freeman has a quarterback development problem. And I think I agree with that. You're kind of
as well.
Yes and no. Like, are you fully in on that? I am.
Yeah, I'm in on that.
Especially where they are at this point in the process, because they feel completely comfortable. And I mean, it opens up because there's another thread on the board about what if Angeli wins the job. And honestly, like if you're fretting about that, I think that you're fretting about the wrong thing. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if that happens, that opens up a completely different can of worms in terms of what's potentially going to happen in your quarterback room going forward. There's a reason that they felt confident enough that they didn't need to go to the portal for the third straight year and for the fourth time in the last 5.
And I think that's a big statement because of what we talked about coming off the heels of your national championship run, having to continue to elevate your team. Because, I mean, what's the next? I mean, the goal every year is obviously to win a national championship, right? But I think that that's even more of the case now more than ever because they just went to a national championship, right? And so this is kind of the roadblock that some of these teams like Michigan, Ohio State of the past few years, it took them on their like third or fourth try in the college football playoff with their coach, Ryan Day, Harbaugh, to go on and actually win the thing, right? And so that's important for Marcus Freeman because I know he's going to continue to get back to the playoff, but can he make headway on winning the national championship? Because I think it's going to take a couple failures to do so. Like Ohio State lost the national championship. Michigan, got beat in that horrible game by TCU. Things have to happen before you go on to win the national championship. You don't just go into the tournament as a newbie and win the thing. And so if Notre Dame feels that comfortability to not go into the portal, knowing kind of what's at stake in the next, maybe you would say 1 to 3, 1 to 4 years, I think it says a lot about their confidence of potentially who's going to be the starting quarterback.
Again, like when you look back at the decision, Marcus Freeman coming into his first season as head coach, when they decided to ride with Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine as the two quarterbacks, when you look at that room and you compare it to this room, when we're talking about quarterback development, really, to me, they have come, a couple 100 miles in the course of 3 seasons, just in terms of the overall shape of homegrown talent in the quarterback room. Don't you think?
Yes.
All right. Plain and simple. So after the quarterbacks, Are there any other position groups that you really have any, major questions about, or even just curiosities, whatever it happens to be?
I wouldn't say major questions, but two position groups that kind of pique my interest. One on offense would be tight end, just because I think that there's kind of a little bit of turnover right now, and I think we're used to having a stud at tight end, and I think it's time for someone else to be the next stud. Maybe that's Raritan, maybe that's Flanagan, maybe it's that the guy that transferred here, Ty Washington from Arkansas. I don't know, but it'd be nice to kind of see someone fill that role because I mean, tight end at Notre Dame is a big position, and so who's the next guy? So that's one group I would be looking at, and then
I'll just say that I think it's going to be Eli Raritan when the smoke clears out of this whole thing. I understand because the room is so unproven, and you lose a guy like Mitchell Evans, who is their most experienced guy as well. I think it's going to end up being Eli Raritan is going to be the stud of this group. But I understand the question because we've got to see it, and Raritan's had his own injuries that he's come off of. I agree with DK on this one. He's right.
It's not a concern. It's not a concern. I'm curious to see how it turns out, basically.
I get you.
Man. And then if I went to the defensive side of the ball, I would say
I feel like you're getting a little defensive.
Defensive side of the ball, I would like to look at the secondary. I'd like to see some cornerback depth. And then most importantly, the safety position. I want to see I think personally that Jadon Blair and Dallas Golden are two guys that are going to have huge springs, and they're going to emerge as guys who maybe are starters. And if they're not starters, they're definitely in the 2 deep by the time the season starts next year. So I think that there's a huge opportunity within the secondary for a lot of guys, a lot of younger guys to kind of stand out. And you already had the true freshman Leonard Moore. And so Notre Dame's not afraid to put those kind of guys in there. If they're skilled and talented and can be difference makers, they're going to get on the field. So I think that Blair and Golden are going to have tremendous springs and falls, but it's going to start first in the spring.
Yeah, I think that safety, like the quarterback, is not going to be fully determined in the course of this spring, because I think that the Virginia Tech transfer Stroman, who has the clavicle injury and who's not going to, really do any football stuff. It sounds like he might be able to do some light drills and those kind of things. I think that he's going to end up being a big factor, like once fall camp starts and once we get closer to the season. But we're not going to get a chance to see him this spring because of the injury. But I think so that is definitely one of the questions. I think the upside to that is, like, you're talking about Dallas Golden. We're going to get to see a lot of younger / more inexperienced guys back there. And, like a guy like Kennedy Urlacher kind of has my curiosity piqued. And, in terms of what they do with him, like, I'm kind of curious.
Talich.
Does he stay? Yeah, Talich is another one, but like Urlacher, for example, does he stay back there at safety? Do they think about, like maybe even Rover, because of his tackling ability, get him a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage? Yeah, that it feels like that to me. But
he feels like Drew Tranquil 2.0.
Yeah, that's kind of where I go. We've got Andre saying defensive line, DK saying offensive line and safety.
The thing is we know what defensive line is at. They're getting a lot of people back from injury, so it's like,
and transfers.
So I think it just kind of defensive line becomes there's a big pool of players there, but I just think the defensive line kind of becomes who falls into first and second, and then honestly how some of those younger guys bouncing back from injury kind of, because they're going to be asked to do more this season. There's going to be more on their plate in terms of workload. So how do they handle that kind of responsibility? Yeah, I think the talent is there, and I think it'll work itself out. But that's kind of, again, I'm not really concerned about that for that reason. I think it's going to work itself out. It's just a matter of kind of going through practice and the fall.
Curious to see what Jason Onye looks like coming back in after missing more than half the season last year. They've got him back, and he's with the team, and definitely curious to see what that looks like. And, again, like, is this a major question? No, but wide receiver is one that I am curious about because of the fact that Greathouse is going to be on a pitch count this spring. Faison's playing, more lacrosse this spring. So there are some younger guys who we're going to get to see, and I'm anxious to see some of them. And I think a lot of people are really anxious to see
But
some of
doesn't
them.
that bode well for CJ Carr? Because a lot of the guys that are going to be probably repping out in the 1s and 2s are the guys that CJ Carr was probably thrown with
Thrown
it
to on the
as a
scout
true,
team last year.
as a
Yeah.
true freshman.
Yeah.
So he has kind of that, relationship.
Which means it could bode well for a Micah Gilbert or a Cam Williams.
Exactly. That's kind of what I was getting at too. Like,
Yeah.
if you think that CJ Carr is going to have a great spring, then you should probably parlay that Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert are also going to have a good spring.
Right. And then if they do, then everyone's just going to be going, where are they? Once the fall, once the season starts, if they don't see enough of them out there. So it's always just, it can never just be pure good. There's always got to be a downside that comes along.
Well, that goes back to because of the stuff that certain people want to, throw out there off of a couple individual practices and watching warm-ups. Like, that's what spins this whole thing, unfortunately. But, everyone's got an opinion, and that's what I guess makes it fun at the end of the day.
ND Sailor says the big news in recruiting is Jason Witten's son, safety, is coming to Notre Dame with his folks this weekend. Top recruit, and he likes Notre Dame. You
this would be awesome.
Something a while
and it's
back.
Linebacker. He plays linebacker.
Does he play linebacker? I thought he was a tight end like his dad.
No. He's a linebacker. I'll double check. Let me fact check myself.
Joe also wants to know if I think Faison will ever pick one sport. I don't think so. I think they're going to let him play both as long as he wants to, and I think that he wants to play both. Like, this is his. I guess this is his. Yeah, this is. Gosh, he's only. Seems like he's been here longer because he's going into his junior football season now. But this is. This is only his second season with the lacrosse team.
Man, maybe he is safety. I might be wrong.
Nick says you're right. He's a linebacker. He might be a safety who's big enough to play linebacker.
I think that's what it is. I think by the time he gets to college, he'll be a linebacker. And I think that's what he's getting recruited as, even though he might technically still be playing safety.
Right.
He's 210 though. He's 6'10" and 210. That's a built dude right there.
Say that again. How big is he?
6'2" and 210 pounds.
Wow. That is, especially for a high school kid. Man. So what about the offensive line? I think DK threw the offensive line in there. Do you think that the first team line that we see on day one is the same one that we're going to see at the end of spring camp?
I'm just going to say no, because I think there's going to be a lot of natural kind of shuffling, and there's some guys who are going to be on, pitch counts and limited availability. So, the offensive line doesn't concern me too much because I know there's a lot of talent in the room and they're actually going to be getting healthier this season. And so my, glass half full opinion on this situation is they made last season work with a lot of injuries, a lot of shuffling of the line. And I think they're actually going to get healthier and be able to incorporate more of their young studs. So naturally, I think they're going to be better. I'm just curious how the lineup kind of falls into place at the end of the day. It's kind of like the defensive line. Like, I'm curious to see how everything kind of, falls into place after it's all said and done. But I know that the talent is there, and I trust that they're going to position these guys right. It's just a matter of what that looks like at the end.
Yeah, I agree. It's not going to look the same day one compared to the end of spring because of the, like you said, the pitch count and the guys who are injured. And also, I just think that there's going to be a lot of moving back and forth and sort of tinkering and experimenting with what guy, like Jagasaw, we might see him take both tackle and guard reps this spring. Who knows? Because that also gives you the ability to kind of, move Gerby Lambert in and out and see what suits him best. And maybe they flip flop Wagner right and left tackle. I'm really curious to see just exactly what kind of things they do experiment with, because they're going to be able to move guys around and like give a lot of guys a lot of reps this spring because of the fact that they don't have to make a decision by the end of the spring. Largely, you've got a good chunk that's already set. It's just a matter of, I think, like you said, figuring out which piece fits best in which spot, that kind of stuff. Decaf is over at Frank Eck Stadium right now, watching a little bit of Notre Dame baseball. Gorgeous day for it. Is it nice there in Cleveland today, Jess?
I think it's like 55 degrees and sunny. So yeah, that's a pretty solid day.
We hit 65 and sunny here. It's supposed to cool off a little bit tomorrow. But
Salty just
should
has
be good
names for everything.
He does. What about the coaches? Is there an assistant coach this spring who you think that like this spring is most important for?
Yeah, the new defensive coordinator.
That's kind of what I was thinking as well. Chris Ash. Like, I think it's just important for him to actually, because that he's crunched a bunch of film and all that kind of stuff. I just think it's important for him to actually be able to get out there on the field, see those guys in action, and kind of call some shots out there.
Yeah, and that's I think 50% of it, and I think the other 50% of it is like you got to be the cool guy. I think too. How are you relating to your players? No, seriously, like how are you?
That's true. Like actually interacting with them. Yeah,
you're on the field, you're talking with them, you're coaching them, you're mentoring them. What does that style look like? How do his players respond to him? Because we know, a lot of these guys had a great deal of respect for Al Golden and what they, what he brought, what he taught, and how he was able to develop them into players. And so I think that's important side of it. And I think that's a huge thing too. Like for you guys, when you're there, I like a coach who's, going up and down the stretching lines, talking to players, engaging with them, getting them fired up. Like, I think that goes a long way at the end of the day, right? Like, at least for me, like when I would be there and it's like some days, it's 6 a.m. practice and you got up at 4:45 and it's like, like you want to be there, but do you really want to be there at 6 a.m.? And like my first spring practice, it was still snowing out. We had 10-degree temps. And it's just like, who wants to be doing that at 6 a.m.? And so I think that stuff goes a long way. It's just kind of player interaction, how you kind of raise the spirits of the players those days. Because again, it's like they were just in the grind of a season 2 months ago. And now you're going into spring practice is what it is. It's not the most fun time, but it's a huge developmental time and just something you got to do as a team.
Yeah, but it's, I think the interaction part of it is pretty important because everyone's used to 3 years of Al Golden. They knew what to expect from Al Golden most of the time. They knew how that was going to work. But now you've got a new guy in charge. So just because you say you're running the same scheme and all that kind of stuff, there's going to be some differences. There's going to be some differences in whatever his tendencies happen to be. And there's obviously going to be, some differences in the kind of personalities that they've got. So he's got to be able to get used to them and they've got to be able to get used to him. It's a big first step getting out there on the field, because it's one thing to do it in the meeting room and the film room. It's another thing to actually do it out there on the field. What about like bottom of that priority list, in terms of who is, from an assistant coach perspective, who is this spring the least important for? I mean, mine is Mike Mickens. I just think that he's set not that there aren't questions in the set, in the secondary that have to be addressed, but it's like, it's Mike Mickens. He's going to get it figured out,
Yeah, and to go back to your prior question, I would also add Mike Brown at the wide receiver assistant up in there as well. I like to share the wealth, defense, offense, kind of give one for each.
Sure.
And I've gone on this kind of rant before. I think it's important for this wide receiver room to just establish themselves, and I think that starts with Mike Brown, and I think there's something to it too of kind of maybe setting a new culture or tone as a wide receiver room this season as well, and I think that starts with him as well.
Yeah, and again, with so many potential young guys out there playing and trying to develop, I think that it's big just from that aspect because, as you've said over and over and over again, the spring is so much about development because you're not, the pace is different. The goal is different. The goal is just to get better, a little bit better every day because you're not game planning and you're not preparing for a game and all that kind of stuff. So you can do so many different things. And with so many young guys out there, I think Mike Brown is a pretty good one to pick as well. So Fred Benson put this one in. Vince and I talked about this yesterday. I'll let you kind of chime in since you were listening to us yesterday. What do you think of Ohio State and USC trolling Notre Dame this offseason?
So I wish I could have, better come prepared with the raw hard numbers here. But, here's what I'll say. I think they were both disrespectful in different ways. But I'll say at least Ohio State has a leg to stand on considering they did beat Notre Dame in a national championship. And as some people pointed out on X as well, they actually used, pictures or footage from games that actually happened within the last 20 years, you know? And so USC is even more of an embarrassment because, Notre Dame has been dog walking them the last 10 years, really. And I think I went over this last week. It just sounds like Chad Bowden and USC are a bit envious and jealous of where Notre Dame stands in terms of not only, head to head, but where they are as a program and what they're doing in the college football playoff on a national stage. And so USC can just kind of kick rocks at the end of the day because, oh, great, you got a wide receiver, but Notre Dame has been dominating you head to head and on the national stage the last 10 plus years.
Most of the guys on the roster weren't even born when Mike Williams was playing for USC. So yeah, to that part of it, the Ohio State part of it, I think that even though Ohio State just beat Notre Dame, I do think that
they're feeling it.
That they feel a threat on their corner. They know that Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman are a threat in recruiting. And so I feel like that's why they felt like they had to take a little bit of a cheap shot at them yesterday.
Well, it just, to me, it kind of just goes back to, I live in this state. I'm around a lot of Ohio State fans. And there's just this complex that you see that mirrors a lot of what Ryan Day did, when with that spout with Lou Holtz. It's kind of like the overall mantra. It's like, you guys are so insecure for some reason, but you just proved how dominant you were, and you just beat everyone.
And you're
won
still
a
insecure.
Championship.
Yeah.
And it's and to directly mention Happy Pot of Gold Day when literally only Notre Dame calls it Pot of Gold Day, and it's their biggest recruiting day of the year.
Yeah.
It just shows that they're on your mind at the end of the day. And it's like, why? Because you just beat them for a national championship.
Yep, exactly. And like I said, they obviously feel that a threat. They feel Notre Dame breathing down their neck.
Now, was the picture pretty nasty? Yeah, he's holding the pot of gold and stiff-arming Osbury into the ground. That's a pretty, as a fan, it made me mad. So maybe that was part of their goal as well. They, maybe they don't care. They're like, let's just tick off these Notre Dame fans even more, even though we just beat them in the national championship. Because it worked. Mission accomplished.
But I didn't even think about it. The fact that they referred to it as Pot of Gold Day. You're absolutely right. The fact that they had to go down that road, I think it shows that insecurity that they've got, because they didn't even just say Happy St. Patrick's Day and then guys carrying the pot of gold against Notre Dame players. They went full pot of gold.
It was a very specific, direct shot.
Yes, exactly. Well, with that, Jesse, I'll shoot this to you. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Ooh, I caught it. Let's go.
All right, then. So we talked about quarterbacks earlier in the show. I've been seeing some people picking Steve Angeli to win the starting quarterback job. my question to you, is picking Angeli a hot take or is it a legit prediction?
I don't think it's a hot take. I think it's maybe a mild, like warming up kind of take at the end of the day, because I think if you said Kenny Minchie, that would be maybe more of a
Hotter take. Yeah.
Because I think Angeli does, he has a legit chance, but I would place the chances at like 60-40, 70-30-ish kind of range if I had to really kind of go, down into that percentage side of things. But he is, I would say, technically the leading guy until proven otherwise type situation. Like, I think if you walked into camp, I think there is a natural kind of depth chart, but I don't think that means that 2 and 3 can't pass 1. I just think of if you had to set something now and who's probably going to walk out there with the first strings and get the first shot at everything, it is going to be Angeli. But again, that doesn't mean that 2 and 3 both potentially couldn't pass him at the end of the day.
I mean, if you're picking anyone to win the job this spring, it's definitely a hot take. But I just like it's not going to happen this spring. Like in terms of what's going to be announced, like they might even keep the pecking order the way they've got it. But like if Angeli is your pick and it is your legit pick right now, you might as well go on First Take and say Patrick Mahomes lost the Super Bowl and he's no longer a top 5 quarterback. Like that's like, to me, it's on par with something like that. Like I would not be pushing all my chips in the Steve Angeli, part of the table right now. Like not even close. Like, do you really think, okay, so they had Steve Angeli last year after he had started a bowl game and won a bowl game, right? And people, like just were ready to anoint him at that point, but they still went to the transfer portal and brought in an injured quarterback from another school to be the starter instead. But so like if you think that Steve Angeli is the reason that Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrock and Gino Gaduli had the confidence not to go to the transfer portal once again, that, my friend, and you're saying that he's going to be the guy, that, my friends, I consider a hot take.
Okay.
So that's the way I'm rolling with it. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame sent out 94 offers on Pot of Gold Day, but none of them were to quarterbacks.
I find it to be reassuring because of what we kind of just talked about there in the main segment. Marcus Freeman and company felt that they didn't need to go to the portal, and they sent out 90 plus offers and didn't feel that they needed to, hit or send one out to a quarterback. So again, I just think it reaffirms or shows their confidence or comfortability with what the quarterback situation looks like right now and kind of the plan that they have going forward. And so for that reason, I have to be reaffirmed because Marcus Freeman has done nothing but reaffirm me more and more as he continues to develop as a head coach at Notre Dame. Like every year, yes, he stumbled some, but he has reaffirmed me at the end of the day. And so I can't do anything but trust him.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what John is saying, though. I still think it's somewhat surprising. I don't disagree with the shape of the room and who they've got and all that kind of stuff. And, look, there's likely to be some movement in that room based on who ends up winning the job, right? The likelihood that all those guys stay is pretty slim. They do have Blake Hebert, currently on campus as a freshman, an early enrollee, in addition to the other 3 guys. They've got Noah Grubbs in the 2026 class, so they're pretty set. They've seen all these 2027 quarterbacks. I just am surprised that because of the fact that things are so volatile, I just think it's important to have at least one quarterback in every class because you just don't want to get caught in a transfer portal crisis, which can easily happen down the road. A couple guys end up going in the portal. Maybe one of them's a guy you didn't expect, So I think that, Joe Rizak is in there for now, but he's I guess I was about to say not a scholarship quarterback, but at the same time, like I don't think we have official word on exactly, like who's a scholarship guy at, to what extent anymore. But a lot of defensive linemen, a lot of secondary guys got offered on Pot of Gold Day, so that's good. But I'm just a little bit surprised because you need to keep that pipeline of top level quarterbacks rolling. So again, you don't get caught, in that crisis mode in the future, depending on, what happens with transfers and that kind of thing. Joe, going back to the Riley Leonard thing, yes, Leonard was coming in before the bowl game. They just didn't announce it. Yeah, so like technically, like I said, you had Steve Angeli. He started the bowl and all that kind of stuff. They had Steve Angeli in practice and able to evaluate him before that as well. So I guess that's more, kind of what I was talking about as opposed to just, the Sun Bowl. But your point is taken. So just the Big 12 has moved 6 conference football games to Friday nights this upcoming season. It gives them a total of 10 Friday night games next season. Do you buy or sell the continuing to move Friday nights for college football?
Buy it. Love it. I'll continue to eat it up. It just spreads that wealth of football across the weekend. I can't watch every game on Saturday as much as I would like. And obviously when the Notre Dame game comes on, that's what I'm focused on for 4 or 5 hours on a given Saturday. And so, to me, it's like if you can spread that action out and gain and allow the Big 12 to maybe get some more exposure and fans to be able to kind of absorb and have a better understanding of what the Big 12 is, and how the state of the football that given season, so you can give a proper evaluation of them kind of maybe compared to some of these other conferences. I love it. And so, yeah, I think that's where I'm at.
I mean, the argument against this is Friday night should be for high school football, and that's traditionally what it's been. And for a long time, like the NFL has always stayed off that corner until the last couple of years. They've gone to this Black Friday thing. But again, that's later in the season. You do have some state championship football games going on there, but it's an afternoon game the day after Thanksgiving. Jesse said, or DK says, Jesse don't care about high school kids. But, this is my point. The more I've gotten away from high school football, the less I care. Like, I'm getting older. I'm home on Friday nights. And to me, having a college football game on TV is, better than probably 9 of the other 10 things, that are potential options to watch. If you're the parent of a high school kid, if you're the significant other of a high school kid, if you're the grandparent or an aunt and uncle of a high school kid, okay, but like that all takes place in a vacuum. Like, that is its own thing. I don't think that moving a few college games to Friday nights is cutting into the interest in high school football. Like, I think if you are directly involved, it's basically like, like when you have kids and, and I mean, I'll say that I was part of this as well, but it's like, you're bragging about your kids in your little league and your high school on Facebook and, Instagram and whatever else. It's like nobody else cares about that stuff but you, because they're your kids and you're interested in them. And it's largely the same with high school football, with the exception of the small communities, but they're all going to be into high school football anyway. They're not going to care about these Friday night college games. So I think that, like I'm home on Friday nights. I think it's great that there's a college game to watch on Friday night, because I don't get to sit home all day and watch it on Saturday because I'm at the stadium covering games.
Yeah, I think kind of what I agree with, and what I was going to say is kind of what you were getting into. It's a small population of people comparatively that have kids in high school, or have some sort of connection to a kid in high school that plays football on a Friday night. There's a much larger crowd of people who no longer have kids that are participating in high school football, like you were saying, that are home on Friday and want something to watch on a Friday evening. And it's like the perfect appetizer for a full day of college football on Saturday. And I agree with what DK was saying. People that were going to the high school games were going regardless. And you're a bad parent if you say you're going to stay home for Kansas versus Nebraska instead of watching your son play high school football.
That's exactly right. If you're going to the high school game, you're going to go to the high school game. And it's probably because you've got a kid or a grandkid or a nephew or whatever who's involved in
There's
it.
a very small crowd of people who just go watch high school football games on Friday for the fun of it because they're just maybe they're a teacher at the school.
Well, again,
or
like
maybe in the community
smaller
or
communities and things like that, that tends to be a big part of your entertainment. And because it's a smaller community, it's like the high school, athletic teams become an extension of the community. And so there is some interest there. But again, it's like you can have both, like both can exist at the same time, like the people who are going to go to those high school games are going to go and they don't care about the game that's on Friday night. Maybe, like you said, they get ticked off, like if you're Joe and you live in Nebraska, or, like Joe's neighbor and you live in Nebraska, you're ticked off because Nebraska is going to play on Friday night because now, your kid's also playing on Friday night. So you don't get to watch that game. Well, okay. So you don't get to watch the one game a year, so I like it. I like it as a TV product. Someone posted on one of our videos yesterday that sports is not entertainment. And I'm not sure exactly, where that came from based on what we were talking about yesterday, but don't you think sports is entertainment? I mean, that's why it's on TV. It's there to entertain us, right? I realize to the players and coaches, it is their livelihood, but to everyone else, it's entertainment.
So it is an entertainment product, and how you let that entertainment influence you, either good or bad, is a different story.
Very well said. No one's throwing their remotes at the TV when if Top Gun Maverick's plot goes off course at the end, but when your favorite team's plot goes on off course at the end, things go
maybe not as
haywire.
entertaining as you thought it would be.
Yeah, maybe that's what we were talking from the RG3 question that we were talking about yesterday. Maybe that's where it came from. I'm not sure, but the whole he thinks that sports debate TV has ruined sports.
Yeah, I think that sports debate TV, when there's not stuff going on, and
must have been Salty, the one who was, going with a different handle. He says it came from the discussion about the comment that sports talk shows are, ruining sports, like I said. Go ahead, Jess.
I think what I was going to say is I just, when there's things to actually talk about and debate because of what's going on, that's all great. But I hate when it's kind of like what you were talking about, like these last couple of weeks, like because the content hasn't been as rich as it usually is. I don't like when people just kind of come up with stuff just to be controversial. And then that's when it gets a little bit, like, what are we even talking about here? Why are we talking about, Dak Prescott in the middle of the offseason and what he's doing on vacation and how it influences how important he takes footballers? You know what I mean? Stuff like that is where it gets annoying. But when you actually have, in-season substance and you can actually have a debate about it, that's a different story. I just don't like, it feels like they're stretching some of these topics out and just kind of debating and arguing just to debate and argue.
Yeah. And I think most of this, a lot of this conversation began with the Stephen A and his LeBron takes and, all those different things. And, it's just on and on and on and on. Fill in the blank. West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey is flat out mad that the West Virginia Mountaineers were left out of the NCAA men's basketball tournament. It's blank that he's asked his state's attorney general to open an investigation into the NCAA selection committee to find out whether any backdoor deals were made.
It's just a bit too much.
I just don't understand why these politicians like you have to go to this, like this is the level that you have to go to.
As much as it sucks, every year there's a first four out and a first four in.
Yeah.
And every year, and I'm not saying it's excusable or acceptable, but someone gets snubbed and someone gets snubbed really hard. And I get it. And it's a lot easier for me to say this because it's not my team or a team that I'm a diehard fan of or been following all season, right? And so I get it. It's okay to be frustrated, but it's like kind of like the 24 or 48-hour rule. It's like it is ultimately kind of out of your control and you just kind of got to let it go. There's just other things that are more important kind of at the end of the day, right? And so all you're doing with this is you're kind of just creating false hope for some of these fans that like something is actually going to happen or change at the end of the day. And because
like they're
at the end of the
miraculously
day,
just going to take whoever out and put West Virginia in,
right?
because the
Like
governor
at the end of the
stepped in.
day, it gets long and drawn out, and nothing really happens. There's nothing that's really going to change, and so it's too much. You kind of again, it sucks. I get that, but you just kind of have to let it go after a couple of days, in my opinion.
Someone's got to be left out. Even if they expand the tournament, someone's going to be left out, just like we found this year with football, right? You know, like Alabama got mad, Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin were mad that they got left out. Now the SEC wants to, completely, redo the whole format, so they make sure they get more teams in. But I guess that's a completely different story. But politicians who do this are obviously just playing to their base. They know that if they do this, they're going to stir up their own people and and make their constituents happy. But they're
it shows that you care, I guess.
Yeah, it shows they care. But to everybody else outside of that bubble, you're just a big crybaby. Is all you are when you push it to this length, because nothing's going to come of it. Ultimately, like you said, you're probably just getting people's hopes up. Nothing's going to come of it, though. But you always hear about politicians doing this kind of stuff. So, I guess kind of related topic. Are you as outraged by North Carolina getting in the men's tournament as most of the rest of the country seems to be?
No. And the reason why I actually feel like I have some logic and rationale behind this answer. Do you remember when Michigan State, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, got let in on a similar situation and it really outraged a lot of people, and they actually had to play in the play-in game?
Right.
Do you remember what happened that season? They went all the way down to like the Elite Eight, I want to say, or at least the Sweet 16, right? And so, and again, this might not track well with a lot of people, but it's my opinion and it's my take. North Carolina is just one of those blue blood programs at the end of the day, and they're going to get kind of, when push comes to shove and it's a 50-50 toss-up, you going with the blue blood or you going with West Virginia?
They're going to get some preferential treatment. That's right.
But the thing is
if you're leaving it to the subjectivity of human beings picking these things, not every decision is going to go the way that even a majority of other people think that it's supposed to go.
Right. And so that's where I'm just like, North Carolina is a blue blood program. They're going to sell the seats. And that's the thing, is they've earned this reputation because of how good they've been at basketball the last 40 years. And so I don't think that there is something wrong when push comes to shove. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the team that's predominantly had a lot of success in the NCAA tournament. And again, if that rubs you the wrong way, I'm sorry, but it kind of bodes the same for Notre Dame. If push comes to shove, Notre Dame would get a budge in the college football playoff because of who they are and how many fans would show up to those games. It's really kind of the similar conversation, in my opinion.
Look at Andrew using facts to back up his argument. That's so cute, Andrew.
I'm more upset about Michigan's seed than I am about this North Carolina situation. And I
they
hate
got seeded
Michigan.
Too low. Yeah.
You look at the resume of the Big Ten and the teams that they beat teams twice that have a higher seed than them. They won the Big Ten championship at the end of the season. It's like, again, I hate Michigan. I will never make excuses for Michigan, but on paper, I'm more pissed about their seed than I am North Carolina making it over West Virginia.
And look, someone's got to get left out. Someone's going to get in. A few teams are going to get left out, a few worthy teams. And in this case, it's West Virginia who's doing all the barking. North Carolina gets in. Like there's what happens if North Carolina goes on a run? What happens
And
if
that
they at
was my
least get to
point
the
of what
Sweet
happened
16?
with Izzo and Michigan State. Just
Yeah.
let the thing play out, honestly. Like, if they lose in the first round, then you could be like, yeah, it was obvious that they didn't deserve. But, like, at the end of the day, they still have a chance. And if they go to the Final Four, then it's like egg on everyone else's face.
Right. Exactly. And, again, like we're quibbling about teams, 67 and 68 and 69 or, whatever, like that's what we're parsing hairs at the end. And so West Virginia might have had a few more quad one wins, but at the end of the day, is it really going to matter? I realize that like to the guys who are on that team, it's obviously going to matter, and their families and their friends and their school and all that kind of stuff. It matters. Well, go out and win the NIT then, because like how many of these snubs do we see go one and done in the NIT as well when it's all said and done? Like someone's got to get in, someone's going to be left home. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Steph Curry is going to be the assistant general manager for men's basketball at his alma mater, Davidson.
It is forecasting his future after the NBA. I think it's awesome. And I definitely think it's based. I think this is kind of the precursor to his life after the NBA. A lot of people go on to be commentators, get into coaching, maybe, get into the management side of things. I think this is a very clear indication of what Steph Curry wants to do after his playing time is over and still be involved in basketball. And I think it'll kind of continue to develop. And what makes it even cooler is it's his alma mater, and Davidson isn't known, on the map maybe compared to a lot of those blue buds that we were just talking about. And so I think it'll prop up Davidson as well, knowing that Steph Curry is tied to the program.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to, like really the profile that Davidson has is because of Steph Curry. And no, Josh, he is not retiring. He's going to continue. He's going to do this as a player, basically. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how that, kind of coexist. But he is getting a little older. What is he, 37, 38 now? Something like that? Yeah. So, I mean, he's getting a little bit older, but he's gonna do this for a while. He's more or less kind of like a brand ambassador, but I think it's pretty cool. A guy of Steph Curry's profile to get involved in something like this. And, like you said, this will probably be the path that his, where he goes in his post-playing days. But it's pretty cool that he's going to be able to do this while he's still a player and be involved with his alma mater and kind of get the second part of his career, like the second act sort of kickstarted at the same time.
Exactly.
So USC women's basketball coach, the opposite of snubs, Lindsey Gottlieb, says she is disrespected by being the fourth number one seed in the NCAA tournament because she and her women of Troy are matched up with number 2 seed UConn in their region. What would you say, Jesse, to console Gottlieb?
So first, we need to realize that Lindsey Gottlieb, same last name as Doug Gottlieb.
No relation, though. No relation.
Always got to clarify. What would I say to console her? This is, if you're so worried about UConn, that's an Elite Eight matchup. And by the time you get to the Elite Eight, you're probably going to be playing a tough team regardless. Because like you, Vince, and I think maybe DJ yesterday were going on about, there's about 4 or 5 teams that you could comfortably say have a legit shot at the national championship. And so the chances of you running into one of those teams in the Elite Eight is highly probable. And so again, this isn't like we're in the round of 64. I think you're sending the wrong message by being focused on what could potentially happen all the way down at the Elite Eight. And if you want some real consolation, how about let's talk about the team that beat both of these schools and somehow is a 3 seed at the end of the day. I think there's bigger bones to be picked than
that's exactly right.
Than what's going on here.
And that's why I would say suck it up, Buttercup, because you're a number 1 seed.
Right.
It's
At
like,
the end of the day, you're still a number one.
yes, you talk about first world problems. There are a lot of worse things to be concerned about than being one of the 4 number 1 seeds. Everyone's going to have a good team. If you're the number 1, there's going to be a good team that's going to be the number 2. That's just the way this whole tournament thing works. Again, like if you wanted to get down and parse resumes and all that kind of stuff, there is at least some case for USC because they did beat the number 1 overall seed UCLA twice, and those are UCLA's only 2 losses. The fact they did play 3 times. UCLA did turn around and beat USC. So, I mean, you could argue that maybe USC deserves to be a little bit higher. But again, like you're splitting hairs now because you're a number 1 seed. UConn is a number 2 seed, and there are, 3 other number 2 seeds. You were going to have to play somebody good at the end of the day. So, I don't know what you're crying about.
To be honest with you, just the direct comparison of how Niele Ivey and Lindsey Gottlieb handled this conversation is why you should be proud that Niele Ivey is the head coach of the women's team, because she didn't talk about it one bit. She talked about, well, it's just time to go to work, and we've got things to figure out, and I don't care where we're at. We're just here to play basketball. And here's a team that got a 1 seed, and they're moaning and groaning about who they're going to be, again, potentially be playing in the Elite Eight if they even make it that far. And so It's just it shows the focus. And I think you guys said it yesterday, or I can't remember where I heard this. It's the job of the coach to always spin everything as a positive or a fun thing at the end of the day. Like what we're doing,
yes,
even though it might suck, is fun, or even though we might not have gotten the outcome that we wanted, how do you spin it in a positive way? And that's immediately what Niele Ivey did. She didn't go into this pit of sorrow about, oh, we're a 1 seed, but I don't like who our 2 seed is. It's like, I'm worried about what's happening in 3 days in our first matchup and how we need to get better if we want to, fulfill our expectations for the season.
Yeah, you can't get hung up on all those little things. The path is the path, and now you've got to deal with it.
It's like not changing.
That's right. Nothing is going to change it. Just like nothing was going to get West Virginia in the tournament or boot North Carolina out of the tournament at this point. They are all in. You were a number 1 seed, and it just happens to be that you didn't get the matchup that you like. But as you said, they've got to win other games just to get to that matchup with you.
Well, and it's I'm glad you shared that story about Paul yesterday, because it's you can get focused in the wrong things, and that's in March. That's exactly just what the other team wants you to be focused on, not them, and potentially your Elite 8 matchup with UConn. And it's funny you brought that story up, because that was probably the most disappointing outcome that Paul had his entire time.
It was Notre Dame. Notre Dame. Yeah.
And I remember I don't remember a lot from when I was a kid, but I remember where I was. I was like literally at a baseball practice in starting my, summer season with Barnaby's baseball. And I remember everyone just kind of like getting the news that they had lost, and like just audible gasp. And like, I can't believe, because Notre Dame baseball was the thing at the time, especially around the South Bend area. Paul's son played in the little league that I was a part of. So like that also played a part of it. And so, it's just, that's the stuff that can kind of happen to you, is you have this great season and you get wrapped up in the wrong stuff and stuff you or change. And now next thing you know, you're losing in the Sweet 16 potentially,
Right. Yep. That's exactly right. Play what's in front of you. And Christopher is asking my feeling on the Notre Dame women going into the tournament. I mean, it is good. Is there more doubt now than there was 3 weeks ago? Of course, because of what they have gone through. But when I look at who's on the roster and you think back at what they did over the course of the better part of 3 months of the season, like we were talking about yesterday, it feels like the selection committee gave much more weight to the last 3 or 4 games of the season rather than the first 3 to 4 months of the season when making that decision. But I don't want to get hung up on that. My point is, we've all seen what this team can do. The fact, like the fact that they were beating, not just everyday ordinary teams, but ranked teams the way they were, by double digits over the course of the season. And we know that is the team. The challenge on Friday is going to be like how they get out and defend the perimeter, because Stephen F. Austin is going to chuck up 3 after 3 after 3. That's what they're going to do. But I mean, Notre Dame has shown that they can go up against some of those good 3-point shooting teams and defend that. Like there's I'm picturing Sonia Citron and her long arms towering over a couple of smaller shooters out there. That's going to be one of the big matchups. But because going back to what Jesse was just talking about, I think that the positive mentality, the positive attitude of Niele Ivey and the coaching staff, that trickles down through the rest of the team. So I feel really good. And, I think that we're going to see a couple of pretty good wins here this weekend at Purcell Pavilion by the Irish, starting with Stephen F. Austin on Friday, and then either Michigan or Iowa State or Princeton on Sunday, and it's on to the Sweet 16 for the 4th straight year.
So a couple of things that I would add, and not that I'm a residential expert like some of the other people on the show right now, but I think the biggest thing for them is having a little bit of time off. I think was great for them because they could just finally stop and catch their breath after the whirlwind of the last ever since they got named the number 1 team in the country. It feels like it's just been this sprint to the finish line, and not a sprint that they were controlling. I guess is what
there was a little bit of a spiral,
right? And so I think
spinning to not quite out of control, but like in that direction anyway.
And so to kind of have some time off, catch your breath, and really have some good practices, and obviously work on some stuff that maybe caused you to start spiraling there a little bit, does well for them. But their biggest thing, in my opinion, and I hate to kind of piggyback here a little bit, but Notre Dame is at its best when their defense pushes their offense into scoring. And that's the thing that I think was really frustrating is at the beginning of the season, they were playing just really good all-around team defense. And I think when you focus on playing hard defense, the offense comes naturally. Like they have 3 amazing guards. Like the points will come. Just focus on playing good defense and allowing that good defense to turn into offense. And I think if they do that the entire tournament, things will take care of itself because of just how skilled they are at every position, really. And especially once the ball is in their hands and they're on offense.
I agree. I don't disagree with that at all. Like everything starts at the defensive end of the floor for them. And Ivy talks about it all the time. Get the stops, get out and run. That's where they're at their best.
Because if you can work in transition and then Notre Dame kind of starts dictating their pace and it speeds up other teams, then they're going to force bad shots. And what's that mean? Notre Dame's grabbing the ball and running out in transition. Or maybe they're sloppy and Hannah's poking a ball out and now they're running in transition again. Like those things, teams start to get uncomfortable when Notre Dame's pace starts to set in a little bit. But that all starts with good defense and getting out, in front of some of these teams.
Yep, exactly. Could not agree more. All right, last question for you tonight. Which is the better sports month, March or October?
So I used to be biased because March is my birth month and nothing is better than, my birth month. But
and October is my birth month.
But I have to go with October because you're in the heat or the thick of college football season. You're starting to get a grasp of where your NFL team is. Are they a playoff team? Are we going to start tanking here for a draft pick? You got the World Series going on for baseball. And then in March, it's just kind of really, you're winding down NHL and NBA seasons. Really in March, in my opinion, all you got is the MLB starting and obviously the March Madness on both sides, right? And so me personally, I'll be the first one to say, and you know this, I'm just more of a professional sports fan than I am a college sports fan. And if March is driven by March Madness, which I enjoy, don't get me wrong, it's just there's far more stuff going on professionally and the implications in October.
Yeah, ultimately, I think the 2 days that are coming up, Thursday and Friday, in this first 4 days of the tournament are arguably the best, 4 days on the sports calendar, just because of all the craziness and all the stories that are developing with upsets and everything else in the tournament. But for the entirety of the month, for all the reasons that you talked about, you got college football and the NFL kicking into, kicking into full gear. Really, we're starting to see what teams are actually going to be legitimate playoff contenders. And of course, the baseball playoffs and the World Series to go along with it. And then, if you're into the other sports as well, NBA and NHL, those sports are getting started. And for that matter, like college basketball hasn't started yet, but it's getting ready to get started. So you've got some of the anticipation with that goes into October as well. So there's just like playoff baseball is the best baseball. And you get that in October to go along with all the greatness of football. So for all those reasons, sorry, Stymie, I've got to go with October as well.
So I know this wouldn't push the needle for you, but I think that March would have a bigger argument if the Masters was the last week of March and not the first week of April.
Yeah, good point. Like if it wasn't right after the Final Four.
Yes.
Yep.
But that's probably done by design,
Yeah, true. Weather 1, but 2 makes for the perfect TV segue going from March Madness into golf. All right, well, that's going to do it for tonight. We're actually on the eve of Jesse's birthday. He's about to enter
the eve of spring practice starting tomorrow.
About to enter the final year of
his
20s.
Whoa. Don't let that be known.
Let me see. I got the email reminder about the start of practice tomorrow. No changes, so everything looks good. So we'll be out there tomorrow. I know Brian will have a show in the middle of the day. Vince and I will be back tomorrow night, and you'll hear some Marcus Freeman comments from after practice tomorrow. The Marcus Freeman press conference on tomorrow's show.
I will, as much as I would say I'd like to be here, I'll be eating a nice steak for my birthday dinner.
Any particular place that you're doing that?
It's I won't say because there's maybe some weirdos that might show up, but there's a new steak place
Cleveland
in the area.
Stalkers.
There's a new steak place in the area that opened up, and I've been wanting to go. They have kind of fun. I don't know if I'll have any, but they have like fun cocktails, good dessert menu, really good steaks. So, I feel like you can never turn down a new steak place for your birthday at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And
I don't have to pay for it. And that's even I'm getting treated. I'm getting treated here.
There you go. All right. Well, enjoy that. And I will talk to you on Thursday. Everybody else, thanks for being here as always. And we'll talk to you tomorrow. Day 1, spring football practice. Notre Dame.